Take a deep look at this black and white photograph from the early 1960s. Two children stand right outside Buckingham Palace. Their clothes are pristine, not a single wrinkle. Their eyes squint slightly under the soft, gentle English sun. They look absolutely perfect. But that perfection was no accident, it was bought and paid for. It cost millions of dollars, ancient titles, and the crushing expectations of a legendary dynasty. To the rest of the world, these two kids were the ultimate definition of luck. Their mother, Caroline Lee Bouvier, had just become a real-life princess through her marriage to Polish Prince Stanislaw Radziwill. Their aunt, Jacqueline Kennedy, was currently the most powerful First Lady in American history, literally redefining elegance for the entire Western world. The kids in the photo are Anthony and Tina. They were the sole heirs to the prestigious Radziwill name and the proud, fiercely ambitious Bouvier bloodline. But there is a dark truth here, one that mainstream historical narratives completely ignore. The brightest lights always cast the longest, darkest shadows. Behind the private jets flying between Paris, London, and New York. Behind the exclusive dinner parties where Truman Capote and Andy Warhol were just regular guests, a suffocating darkness was closing in. The media back then was never allowed to print it. In Western culture, there is a very thin, very dangerous line between extreme privilege and total imprisonment. The public back then, and honestly most people today, look at the ultra-elite with intense curiosity mixed with envy. We see the massive estates in the Hamptons. We see the custom haute couture gowns fresh from the runways of Paris. And we ask ourselves a naive question: how could the rich achieve real tragedy? How can someone who has absolutely everything still suffer? Have you ever wondered what it truly feels like to have your entire childhood treated as a public relations campaign? For Anthony and Tina, the family name wasn't a source of comfort, it was a gilded cage. Every smile was calculated, every bow was practiced. Every public appearance was a high-stakes performance designed to prove to the world that the Bouvier women had won the game of global high society. But that is the ultimate trap of old money and aristocracy. Their tragedy does not come from a lack of material things. It comes from the brutal demand to always look flawless, even when your inner world is shattering into a million pieces. What you show to the world matters far more than what you actually feel. That was the unwritten golden rule that Lee Radziwill hammered into her children before they could even read. Anthony and Tina were not raised as normal children. They were treated like high-end accessories, designed to perfect the image of a majestic lifestyle. To Western audiences, this is the ultimate Gothic paradox, a life of unimaginable luxury on the outside and total psychological isolation on the inside. The American dream tells us that money buys freedom. But for these children, money bought an absolute lifelong sentence to silent compliance. Can money and a royal title protect a child's soul? Can it shield them from the deep undercurrents of jealousy? The toxic sibling rivalry between the Bouvier sisters, and a destiny that seemed cursed from the start. Today, we are not talking about Jackie's famous dresses. We are not focusing on Lee's extravagant galas. We are stepping right past that heavy velvet curtain to decode a deeply hidden chapter. This is the mysterious, untold fate of the two children of Lee Radziwill. Imagine being born as a prince. You have the blood of the Kennedys and the Bouvier running through your veins. What do you do with that? In 20th century high society, the standard answer was simple. You just exist. You pose for fashion magazines. You marry an incredibly wealthy heiress. Then, you sit back and let your family fortune multiply. That is the easy path, a life of pure leisure, wrapped in total privilege. But Anthony Radziwill chose a path that completely shocked the New York aristocracy. He flatly refused to be a trust fund prince. He did not want to ride on the coattails of his family's fame. When he grew up, Anthony never used his royal title to secure an easy, comfortable job. He wanted the world to respect him for his own merits, not because of his princess mother or his famous aunt. So, he threw himself into television journalism. It was a brutal field that meant high stress, relentless deadlines, and real grinding work. Think about the sheer weight of that choice. In the United States and Europe, the media industry is a meat grinder. It doesn't care about your pedigree when a breaking news story hits at 3 in the morning. Anthony could have spent his 20s sunbathing on yachts in the French Riviera, sipping champagne with European monarchs. Instead, he chose the sweat, the stress, and the chaos of a functional career. He started at the very bottom at NBC Sports, enduring endless hours and dusty, grueling field assignments. Think about this wild contrast. This was a man who could easily sit in the front row at Paris Fashion Week. Instead, he was standing in a smoke-filled American newsroom, arguing over split seconds of sports footage. It was more than a career choice. It was a quiet, deliberate rebellion against the massive shadow of his family tree, and Anthony actually won. Western audiences did not admire him for his wealth. They respected him for something modern elites have completely lost: quiet dignity. He earned the prestigious Peabody and Emmy Awards for his groundbreaking documentary films. When he stood on that stage to accept his awards, the world did not see Prince Radziwill. They saw a brilliant journalist. They saw a self-made man who successfully outran the suffocating ghost of his legacy. This strikes at the very heart of the Western meritocracy ideal. We love a self-made man, but we absolutely worship a man who was born into royalty and chose to earn his keep anyway. He traded his crown for a press badge, and in doing so, he achieved a level of respect that his family's millions could never buy. But fate is a cruel, merciless writer. Just as Anthony finally found his own place in the sun, destiny struck a lethal blow. At only 34 years old, right when his life and career were peaking, he was diagnosed with a rare, aggressive cancer. For anyone, cancer is a devastating sentence. But for a man who spent his whole life proving his independence, this disease became the ultimate test of his soul. Through years of agonizing surgeries and treatments, Anthony refused to play the victim. He kept working. He kept showing up to the office with a proud, defiant smile. He did not want the world to pity him as a tragic Radziwill child. He married Carol DeFalco, a sharp, resilient journalist from a working-class background, who stood firmly by his side through his darkest medical battles. This marriage was perhaps his ultimate statement of independence. He didn't marry a European countess or an oil heiress. He married a real working-class American woman who understood the value of labor, grit, and authenticity. Together, they formed a sanctuary far away from the toxic vanity of the jet set. Then, the summer of 1999 arrived. It was a summer that changed American history forever, becoming the darkest chapter for the Kennedy clan. On the night of July 16th, a small plane vanished into the thick fog over the Atlantic Ocean. The pilot was John F. Kennedy Jr., Anthony's closest cousin and his absolute best friend. The entire nation held its breath. At a family estate in Martha's Vineyard, Anthony was resting, his body completely ravaged by late-stage cancer, counting the hours in total, heartbreaking helplessness. Imagine the psychological torture of that moment. Anthony was fighting a losing battle against his own cells, while his best friend, the golden boy of America, was lost somewhere in the cold depths of the Atlantic. It was a double strike of tragedy that felt almost mythological, like an ancient Greek curse catching up to a modern dynasty. When rescuers found JFK Jr.'s body deep on the ocean floor, a part of Anthony died right along with him. The end of this chapter is a scene that will break any heart. At the memorial service out on the freezing Atlantic waters, people saw Anthony Radziwill. He was a dying man himself, using the absolute last ounces of his fading strength. Yet he stood completely upright on the deck of the ship to say goodbye to his brother. It was more than family loyalty. It was the final soaring pride of a man who refused to break. Less than 4 weeks after burying JFK Jr., Anthony Radziwill closed his eyes forever at the age of 40. Think about the unimaginable grief of his mother, Lee Radziwill. She had spent her entire life competing with her sister Jackie, but in the end she suffered the exact same tragic fate. She had to bury her only son, right after her beloved nephew was lost. Where was the comfort of money in that moment? What did a princess title matter when you were staring at the coffin of your own child? The total emptiness of high society privilege was never more exposed than in that tragic summer of 1999. Anthony's story was a tragic, heroic battle against fate. But the story of his younger sister, Anna Christina, known to everyone as Tina, is a completely different kind of rebellion. She chose the ultimate resistance: silence. We live in an era entirely obsessed with clout. People are desperate for social media attention. They will expose every single corner of their private lives, sell out family secrets, and humiliate themselves just for a fleeting moment of fame and digital validation. But this trend is not actually new. In the 20th century, the jet set did the exact same thing. They constantly jockeyed to get their names into the New York gossip columns. They craved the spotlight like oxygen, needing it to feel alive. In the high society circles of New York and London, obscurity is considered a social death sentence. If you aren't seen at the Met Gala, if your name isn't in vogue, you simply do not exist. But Tina looked at that endless cycle of vanity and saw it for what it truly was: a meat grinder for the human soul. But Tina Radziwill watched that world with quiet horror. Ever since she was a little girl standing next to her glamorous mother and aunt, Tina understood a painful truth. The media spotlight is a monster that swallows human privacy and peace of mind whole. She watched her mother suffer from deep depression, caused by constant comparisons to Jackie. She saw her Aunt Jackie hiding behind giant sunglasses, constantly running from aggressive paparazzi. She saw her brother Anthony literally work himself to death to prove his worth. So, Tina made a choice. It was the ultimate act of rebellion for a high society heiress. She chose total obscurity. After university, Tina took a job that no one in the elitist Bouvier family could comprehend. She became a post-production assistant. She chose to be a technical worker behind the camera, hidden away in the darkness of an editing bay. She never wrote a scandalous tell-all memoir to expose her mother or her famous aunt. She turned down every single interview request from major American networks. Whenever reporters tried to exploit her for juicy stories about the Kennedys or the Radzywills, Tina answered with absolute, ironclad silence. For an American public raised on talk shows, tell-all books, and high-profile divorces, Tina's complete withdrawal from the public eye was deeply baffling. The tabloids wanted her to weep on camera. They wanted her to dish the dirt on Jackie's secret love affairs or Lee's hidden jealousies, but Tina held the line. She realized that the only way to win a game rigged by the media is to refuse to play it entirely. This silence sparked a massive debate among historians and royal watchers. Many people openly praised her lifestyle, noting that Tina possessed real, authentic class. She did not need media money, and she certainly did not want public pity. But this exact same silence also set the stage for a massive controversy involving class, family drama, and inheritance. The shockwave centered on Lee Radziwill's final will in 2019. When Princess Lee Radziwill passed away in 2019, her legal will was made public. It completely stunned New York society. Lee left her entire estate, worth a massive $50 million, solely to Tina. She left absolutely nothing to her daughter-in-law, Carol, who was Anthony's widow. She also left nothing to Caroline Kennedy, Jackie's only surviving child. This diabolical piece of legal paperwork exposed the deep, generational fractures within the family. In the Anglo-American legal tradition, a will is the final definitive statement of a person's true feelings. By freezing out Carol and Caroline, Lee sent a clear, chilling message from beyond the grave. The old rivalries had never truly died. They were simply frozen in ink. Let us look closely at the psychology of this wealth. It raised so many sharp questions. People pointed out a glaring contradiction. Jackie Kennedy had famously written in her own will that she felt a duty to financially support Lee because Lee always complained about being broke. Yet, when Lee died, she was secretly sitting on a $50 million fortune. Was the whole narrative of the poor, overlooked younger sister just a masterclass in psychological manipulation? Did she play poor to get family handouts while quietly accumulating immense wealth behind closed doors? But the most shocking part of the story is not the $50 million. It was Tina's reaction to it. After inheriting this massive fortune, Tina did buy a private island. She did not throw lavish, star-studded galas to revive the old high society glory days. She did not join the celebrity elite. Instead, she continued to live a completely quiet life in a modest apartment, totally hidden from the press. Think about how Western society reacts to sudden wealth today. We expect luxury real estate tours, multi-million-dollar jewelry hauls, and constant digital flaunting. Tina did the exact opposite. She treated $50 million not as a luxury, but as a security deposit for her anonymity. To Tina, $50 million was not a ticket back into the high society circus. It was simply a shield. It was a tool to buy her total freedom and her sacred silence. She fully understood the cost of her family name. In a dynasty where everything was always for sale and put on display, silence was the only way to save her soul. She chose obscurity as her true final salvation. As we close the final pages on the children of Lee Radziwill, we have to face a profound philosophical question. In the grand scheme of things, what does all that privilege actually mean? Near the end of her life, Lee Radziwill published a nostalgic photography book called Happy Times. In it, she wrote a poignant line. She said that without memories, there is no life, and that memories should only consist of happy times. But her two children, Anthony and Tina, were the ones who truly paid the price for those memories. They lived under an unbearable daily pressure to maintain a flawless illusion created by their mother and high society. This is the great illusion of Western consumer culture. The belief that if you curate a beautiful enough image, your internal suffering will magically disappear. But history shows us that the more flawless the exterior, the more corrupted the interior usually is. When you step back and look at the whole picture, you see a universal law of life, a law that no amount of money can ever. We do not actually own anything at all. We do not even own the flesh and bones we are standing in. Everything falls away when the final chapter closes. Wealth, passion, ambition, they all fade. Our memories and the love we give are the only things that truly define us. The self-proclaimed royalty of 20th century New York. From style icon Babe Paley to literary giant Truman Capote and Princess Lee Radziwill herself are all gone now. They are all resting deep in the cold earth. The expensive masks they wore to the legendary black and white ball have turned to dust. The priceless haute couture gowns are just museum pieces covered in glass. To a modern Western viewer, looking back at these mid-century icons feels like studying a lost civilization. They built monuments of style, prestige, and social dominance, yet time has eroded them just as it erodes everything else. Their bank accounts are closed, their titles are vacant, their grand townhouses have been sold off to the highest corporate bidder. It matches the ancient wisdom written thousands of years ago. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. In front of the grave, every single human being inherits the exact same plot of land. In the eyes of death, a European princess with $50 million looks identical to a regular worker on the streets of New York. There is absolutely no difference. But what gives this story its lasting power is how the Radziwill children chose to handle their fate. They completely rejected the scripts written for them by the media, by history, and by their own family. Anthony fought until his very last breath with the honor of a self-made journalist, never giving up to cancer or the ghost of the Kennedy name. Tina chose peace through the immense power of anonymity, refusing to turn her family trauma into public entertainment. They proved to high society that true dignity cannot be bought. It does not matter how many times your name appears on a glossy magazine cover. True dignity is having the courage to be exactly who you are when the stage lights finally go dark. That is the final, most human chapter in the century-long saga of Lee Radziwill and her children. So I want to leave you with one final question. If you were placed in Tina Radziwill's shoes, if you were born at the absolute finish line of wealth, with a royal title and a $50 million inheritance, what would you do? Would you step out into the bright lights, enjoying the media adoration and the thrill of the elite world? Or would you step back into the shadows, choosing total anonymity to save your own soul?